G'day everyone and welcome back to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. I'm really excited to kick off 2026 with you. We've just finished our first full calendar year of podcasts and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared an episode, sent a message or stopped me for a chat. I genuinely appreciate it. This year we're aiming to bring you even more great guests with plenty of practical conversations you can take straight back to your own operation. We'll be featuring more local producers too. People right here in our region who are doing good things, having a crack, who've got great stories worth sharing. I'm also pleased to say that we've got some regular voices returning. Chelsea from Herd Solutions will be joining us on a monthly basis with veterinary updates and timely animal health advice. And Morgs from Elders is back as well, committed to a monthly livestock market update to help us make sense of what's happening and what it might mean on farm. So whether you're listening in the ute, on the tractor or in the yards, welcome back. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy what we've got coming in 2026. Welcome everyone to Digging Deeper. We've got a guest with us, Grant Sims. How you going?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Now you just spent the day at Gippsland Ag here sharing a whole lot about foliar sprays and seeding.
Yep.
Want to just give us a quick little rundown first about where you started, because you were a generational farmer, but you spent some time off farm, didn't you?
Yeah, yep. So obviously grew up on the farm. I'm sixth generation and always grew up helping, at sowing and harvesting, and we were sort of cropping and livestock operation. I then wanted to, I didn't like sitting inside in school and that much and wanted to get out and work on the farm, and actually went and did a trade and did that for a few years and travelled around and then came back full-time on the farm in about 2006.
So what trade and what area are we talking about that you came back to?
So we're from Echuca, Northern Victoria. I actually went and did an electrical apprenticeship. So I'm a qualified electrician by trade, and I was only just talking about this earlier. I think it sort of in somewhat helped me in the way I think, because I've done a lot of study and research in this space, but I think a lot of times in the farming we're always looking at somewhat treating the symptom. And so when we were sparking, if I was trying to fix a milk vat or something that wasn't working, there's no power here. We had to trace it back. And when we find the problem back, it could be right at the start. If we address that and fix it, boom, now it's all working. And that's the sort of mindset and the way I would think when I'm looking at my crops. Why have I got a leaf disease here? So putting on a fungicide, okay, it treats a symptom and prevents it from spreading, but it hasn't actually fixed it as such. And I then would go back and trace where the problem is. And that's the way I try and look for everything, is for let's go back and go back, keep going back until we can find the problem. Let's fix that, and then bang, it'll flow on, and now we're working.
Right, so it's a bit of a whole mindset shift in the way you look at crops and livestock.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And then, I'd read, that's where I just threw myself for years when I got back on the phone. Into the farm, into research, or trying to find answers to those problems that we're getting. And then I would do, much like you guys, my own trials and research, and then try this, and that didn't work. And then, we were just talking in the ute then. It's when it doesn't work, that's the valuable parts, because we can all go out and when it's working and show everyone how good does this look. But when it doesn't work, that's what I want to see. Why isn't it working? And ask the question, why? And then we keep working until we can find that, and that's when we learn and we grow.
Yeah. So 2006, did you say you came back on the farm?
Yep, full time, yeah.
Yeah. So you came back, and I'm assuming your dad didn't give you the keys to the farm straight away, but you must have seen a problem and started talking. What was the problem back then? Why you started thinking about a different way of doing things?
Yeah, well, when I first got back home on the farm, my main first job was, along other things, it was boom spray operator, doing that, and I'd jump in and we'd be doing a knockdown and they'd say, we've got to chuck this in, that in, all these things, and in insecticide because we're going over the paddock to knock it down. And I'm like, why? What do we got? And I'd always ask the question, why? I was always asking questions because I always like learning. And they would say, just in case there's an insect in there, well, it's a good opportunity to knock it out now. And I was like, what if there's no insects in there? And what's it doing to the good guys, like worms? And I was always... And it just didn't gel with me. And then we're jumping on and we're seeing crops and we'd have rhizoctonia or root disease. We're starting to see more things like yellow leaf spot, in wheat and net blotch. And I'm like, why are we getting these things? And then, talking to Dad and Grandpa, and they'd say, we never used to have to spray for that, but now we do. And I was like, well, something's wrong, because like, why are we all of a sudden now having to do it? And so we were looking at, sort of the why, and then what can we do? Let's look at things that are potentially causing this and are detrimental to soil, and start doing less of that, and then try and encourage things that are better and doing more of that. And I was pretty fortunate. Dad sort of gave me, and it was my uncle as well at the time. There was 4 of us and my cousin all on the farm, and they actually, I think when my grandpa was 16 years old, his father died, and he took over the farm at a very young age.
Right.
And so when my dad and uncle got to, about 18 or whatever, they got sort of, handed the reins and said, right, it's you guys have a go. And they were very innovative and early adopters of no-till and things like that. So they always
fairly forward thinking.
Yeah, encouraged a bit of, trialling and stuff like that. So then we got into the liquid fertilizers and trying to focus on, let's get some more, trace elements and minerals, because we're putting a lot, nitrogen and phosphorus and those key things on, but we're not addressing, like, surely when to grow anything, seed or us, it's all, you need certain levels of zinc and all the things. So we started looking at adding a bit of that in through a liquid form, injected in the soil with the crops. And over time, we started to see all of a sudden that rhizoctonic root disease and leaf disease just to a point disappear. And that's good. And then we started to see if we can, we just progressed over time, adding foliars and things in to correct these deficiencies, which we saw, give the plants more resilience and ability to hold flowers and set fruit and grain and things like that. So, yeah, it's sort of a bit of a journey, but I'm still learning, and I don't have all the answers. We still make lots of mistakes, and it's very complicated and tricky sometimes, but I've found we can overthink things too, and there's simple fundamental things that if we follow those principles and systems, no matter what farming or crop you're growing, you'll start to see positive changes.
Yep. I think one of the things that I really picked up today is that you're a real observer. You must spend time in the paddock looking at things, walking through, digging holes and things like that. And what I seem to notice is that you'd see a problem and not think straight away, this is how we fix it, but you get curious about as to why it's got the problem in the first place. And you must be a good reader, because I actually thought you must have had a few degrees in the area or not, but you're just self-read and talk to people, is that right?
Yep, yeah, and self-taught, I suppose. And yeah, read a lot of books and then do a lot of, I'm lucky, unfortunately, I get to spend a lot of time with soil scientists who've had on our farm, or, different contacts I've met over the years, so I can, trial things and go, we're seeing this here, and get some information on why, to understand how it's working. But yeah, and I think especially in cropping and that, we would spend 12, 16 hours a day, in a glass box sitting there. So it's a pretty good time to think. And I come up with all kinds of crazy ideas in there. But then, yeah, that observational thing that I think it's a skill, and it's something that, like anything, playing footy, do exercise in your mind, your body, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I think as a lot of times now we seem to, as farmers, pay someone to do a lot, whether it be, looking at advising us with things, and that's great because we can get another sets of eyes in, but we've got to get out there and look ourselves. And I found, getting out in the paddock once a week and catching things and looking at how they're growing, and that's when you can really learn. And so I think that's a really strong thing. I try and take the kids like once a week on a Sunday, go for a drive around and, have a look at crops, and it's a good little crop tour to do and start to teach them how to look at things as well. So
a little bit off topic, but early days, do you reckon there's going to be a 7th generation on the farm?
I think so. I've got, 4 kids, 6 between my partner and I, and they're all keen. They all love getting in and helping out on the farm, and I think we're very lucky as farmers because we can, take our kids to work and teach them about this stuff in life. So we'll see what happens. We've got one getting close in year 11 this year, so they're getting real helpful, especially in the seed job at the moment. I can get them in their bag and seed and a bit of child labour. But it's good.
Now, take us through a typical, I guess, coming up to, say, an autumn planting. What does your operation look like, and how has it changed over the years? So we're trying. We have mainly cropping and seed production we do.
But we also have a grazing part of the operation. We run about 250 cows in the calf units. So we've got some irrigation where we'll get that going very shortly. We'll pre-irrigate and get some long season. We'll do a combination of like pure forage crops. So we've got something to carve onto soon and gets a jump start on the season. And then we'll do some winter, wheats and long season stuff to get. And they're all kind of littler paddocks, so it's good to get them out the way, and then we can roll into, our main sowing program sort of mid-April onwards.
Yeah. So how does your program look? Because you don't use much synthetics anymore down the tube. So talk us through how you actually prepare a paddock and then rates of sowing and things like that.
Yep. So we used to be, the traditional 80 to 100 kilos a map, as an 80 kilos a wheat was always a sort of, that was the sort of the go, and then, get that up and then top dress and all that sort of stuff. But now we keep evolving. We might transition, because when you've had that sort of a system, for what we're trying to do, we're trying to get soil structure, fungi, biology, microbes and those things working. Now, with those high rates of fertilizer like that, it's very hard to do that. But then there's, it's...
Because they're quite antagonistic to a lot of those things, aren't they?
Yeah, like, say, for instance, like nitrogen-fixing microbes. Like, we all know legumes can fix nitrogen, and we put rhizobia on it, it can enhance that process. But there's also bacterias like azotobacter and all these other ones that you can put in there that will make the plants, give them the ability to fix their own end, even grasses and stuff. So, but for them to work, if you put down heaps of soluble in nitrogen, free nitrogen, they basically either kills them or they stop working, because there's no, there's a free lunch essentially they've got there. So this is a tricky bit about weaning off that and getting them going, so that then we can drop the nitrogen out as such, and then use just these bugs. And so that's where we're at now, and we can use liquid products that can help facilitate that. So, like, I never try and say don't do anything, but the dose is the poison. You can feed a bit of urea into, I was saying today, like into a rumen of an animal through a feed mix, and it can stimulate microbial activity and digestion and growth. Same in the soil, but too much of it will kill the animal. Same in the soil, it can too much. So it's about knowing that threshold and putting little bits in to stimulate, and then we can top it up with foliars. So last year we're sort of pushing the boundaries where we're putting no N at sowing anymore, and we're injecting these liquid products like Humour Boost and things that are like a liquid carbon with all these nitrogen fixers in it. We'll also, I find in our program, very important is the seed priming we do. So all the seed we get is bare. We usually retain our own seed, but bare and untreated.
Are you quite hard to get down here, the bare seed?
Yeah.
Do you have much trouble early days to find bare seed?
Yes, in some species especially. So that's why we grow a lot of our own. But I've now got seed companies that they know I've got to put in an order like first before everyone else, and I've got to anticipate how much we'll need for everything and get it bare. And then, because that fungicide, insecticide on the seed can be very detrimental to this process, and that's part of what I was talking about today. It has its role and purpose, that's for sure, but what I'm sort of here to talk and show people that, maybe inspire or intrigue people to another way. So if you have to use that, by all means, it's your farm, you do what you got to do to get your crop growing. But I like to think if there's another way that could enhance not only a plant's immune system, root growth, and set that genetic potential up, that's the same cost or cheaper, and you can potentially make it yourself, why not? If you can see, and there's always been a lot of fear around, if I drop this fungicide out, I might get smut or bunt or something later in the year. But I've done this for 20 years on our farm without anything on the seed, and we don't never get smut or bunt or net blotch, any of that stuff. But if we get the seed, the immune system, and the strength of that plant up, which we can set up at sowing, and then we address nutrient and mineral imbalances through foliar and through the growth stages of the crop. There's a couple of key times to do that. We can set that up to basically have no disease pressure. And then through like epigenetics, we're increasing that plant's ability, especially if that plant gets a sniff of a disease, rust, and then we can put, nutrition and biology on it, and it overcomes that. Then there's some genetic things going on where we can next generation be stronger for that.
So you're saying almost they build an immunity.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
100%. Yep. And I've seen it. We're on retained seed that then has been sown into a conventional system that's had next to no disease pressure, next to a variety, the same variety that has
Different seed.
Yep, different seed sourced differently. So
now, just on that, say we were to buy some of your seed from your area, bring it over here. Does that carry down to this area, or is it localized immunity?
No, I've seen it when especially like we're getting commercial products and priming it on the seed. I've seen it. I get feedback all the time where they've put it in the ground and seen it explode, with a lot more germ and vigor. But this year was big. Like we had a real dry finish, and any of the seed that was primed like that stayed greener, those crops longer, because we had the microbial, stuff happening around the roots. It gives it resilience and helps it hang on in those times of stress. So that seed priming is the lowest hanging fruit, something that we can do so economically, and it can make such a big difference if we get it right at sowing.
Yeah. So that priming liquid, what is that, or is it too hard to explain over?
Oh, look, we use some commercial products like Humour Boost. Last year it's C-Max and a Trichobac soil on the seed.
Is that just a product you can mix together then pour on the seed basically?
Yep, we do that. I've used that many different things under the sun, from worm juice, snake oil, or, all the different things out there. And some of them you go, I don't know, this is the tricky part in this world, like how, to get a visual. And that's when we use urea. You go, oh, how good's this? Because you throw it out there and boom, you can see that visual. But I've found some of these things, if we get them to work, the visual, it is mind-blowing and staggering what we can do. There's a lot of different ones out there, and you can make your own, and there's a lot of companies sell. But like things like kelp, if there's any product with fish and kelp in it, is usually really good, because there's hormones and things in there in the kelp that will help trigger germination and root development. We're using like azotobacter and N-fixing microbes in there that then triggers the plant to be able to start doing it itself. They're really good. There's lots of, like worm juice, a lot of people use that, or worm extracts. There's a lot of cool microbes in there that'll do good things as well. So, yeah.
Now you mentioned cereals there, but do you treat all seeds?
Yep.
Yeah. So
everything.
Clovers, grasses, everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really good, and I'm now pretty excited because we've finally got because there's a few species out there that the big companies just flat out won't, they just treat it all. And canola being one, sorghum one, corn, one. So now I've got a few of these companies where we can buy corn, canola, everything bare, and treat it ourselves. Now, I actually had a meeting like literally a week ago, and I said, we've got alternatives, because they put, they're all worried about blackleg, say, in the canola, but they told me that some of these fungicides and things we're putting on is actually the activity it's having now on blackleg is slowing down, and in some cases not even working anyway. And I found it can. So we're playing around with products, biological products, that we can put potentially blackleg in a petri dish, and then look at it under a microscope, add these biology to it, and see what starts attacking it and breaking it down. And that's what we're priming the seed with. So yeah, I'm pretty excited at the moment, because we're working on a primer that we can, instead of buying canola treated this way, we can have an alternative with this way that potentially not only, we want it to address, potential further disease later on with blackleg, insect, red legs and that at emergence, but also if we can get a product to do that whilst promoting root development and growth, happy days. That's the sort of where that's what we're doing.
Yeah, so you mentioned you grow monocrops, obviously, for cereals and grain, but you've got a big bent towards multi-species as well. Do you want to talk about why you love your multi-species so much?
Yeah. So we do grow some monocrops, but like for seed production and things, but we do a lot of companion and intercropping as well. So even a lot of our seed crops, like we could grow like wheat and clover, and clovers are so good for us because, we can put the wheat in and a little bit of clover, small rates, and then when we harvest, we can either harvest the two and separate the seed easy, or we just turn the fans up flat out and just blow the clover seed straight at the back and just harvest the wheat. So, it's really good. And obviously things like clover, it'll fix nitrogen into the soil, so as a companion to the wheat, which likes N. They can also help unlock phosphorus and calcium. So, there's lots of different benefits there. But we found early, through the process, say I was growing canola, we do a lot of canola with a companion, like either vetch or, peas or beans. We've done heaps of different combinations. And canola on its own, big requirement for N, disease and insect pressure always there, usually with canola. When we start putting faba beans with it or another, like a legume, we saw disease and pest pressure drop. And then nitrogen requirement dropped because we were creating it for the plant as we were growing. So, we did trials with this where we'd just do monoculture canola and then a companion or dual crop, and we'd harvest the canola on its own, get 2.2 tonne, but we harvest the canola and beans and we got 3 tonne. So it might have been 2 tonne of canola, so a little bit of dip in the yield per hectare, but we got an extra tonne of beans.
Yeah.
So, we love it, and we just find the more diversity we add, that's like nature's way. We get more and more cool things happening, mineralisation of different minerals and sharing. Now, in a grazing system, that's easy because we just grow them all and we can harvest them with an animal. But in a cropping system, it's a bit trickier, so we've got to be selective in how many species we can add to it and what we can use. Because, if we're harvesting it with a machine, 2 or 3 things we can pull apart, but it's hard to do, 4 or 5 or more. But I know a lot of people that are growing peas, barley, oats, maybe beans together at different ratios, harvest them together and then sending them to a mill, grind them, and that's a perfect feed ration. But they've dropped their nitrogen requirement. A lot of times in all farming now, cost of production is the thing that's killing us all our gross margins.
Yeah. Now, I was meaning to ask you before in the car, when you have got multi-species in there, because you're not opposed to chemical control of certain things, are you?
Nah, look, I sort of live by a bit of a mantra or motto: do less harm and try and do more, things that are good, like more beneficial. So, for us, like, we're not organic. Like, all these chemicals are all a tool we can use. We don't use insecticides or fungicides anymore, but if we have to, for whatever reason, to save a crop, we will and can. And we know that if we do need to, we know it'll work because we haven't overused them and built resistance in. But we've just found other ways. But in terms of weed control, like, we're growing seed crops, we've got to have them clean. So we'll still use select herbicides as such to knock out, selective stuff. But we basically, I think the fungicide and insecticide are the easiest ones to get rid of, and they're the most detrimental to the soil biology. So, I'm happy to have them out of the system, and then, the odd herbicide there if we've got to use it. Choose one that's going to do less harm, that's not going to be ongoing and more damaging.
So with weed control then, how do you view it? Do you just look at a paddock before you go in there and say, well, thistles are growing well in this paddock, so we're going to replace the thistle with something else that's going to like that environment? Or do you try and chemically knock out those thistles first before you go in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, first of all, I'll just say, like, if you want to grow maximum production and biomass, we've got to eliminate any competition prior to establishment. That goes for a wheat crop, a cover crop, whatever crop you're growing, because if you already got stuff growing there and you try and sow into it, when you get that first opening rain, whatever's there growing first is already photosynthesized and already got big root system. It's going to take off, and then the stuff that's emerging is like the little brother. It's going to be harder to catch up. So firstly, like, on that, where we see people not growing as much, whether it be wheat or cover crops, it's when they've sown into dirty paddocks, and then that's robbing its potential. Secondly, on the thistles, that's it. We don't stick to a hard and fast rotation like where it might be wheat, canola, whatever. Like, we'll look at the paddocks at harvest and sort of look at what it's trying to tell us as such, and weeds are good indicators. It can be what's going on. Sometimes it could be you've got a lot of ryegrass, so we need to put in a break crop to try and use the chemical rotations to help eliminate that. But like you say, that soil, and we sort of touched on it today, is probably hungry for that ryegrass because it's actually trying to repair and fix, or it's maybe in a thistle's case, you've got these tight compacted soils and it's the only thing that can grow really well there and penetrate that soil. So when we're designing our mixes and cover crops, we'll use those plants as indicators to know what's going to grow well and when we're building a mix. So like I said earlier, if we've got thistles, we can put like things like sunflowers or chicory in, which are in the Asteraceae family. Now, when they start growing in the paddock, we start to see thistles disappear because we're replacing that soil is asking or screaming for that particular root system to help break up compaction or whatever it may be doing. So we can then go, well, we can't make much money on a thistle, but let's put it in a plant we can make money on either grazing or harvesting, and then it'll start doing the job that thistle's doing, and the thistles disappear. So we do a fair bit of that as well.
Mm. All right, now take us back for the listeners that weren't here today. You spent the past 6 hours talking about foliars and how we get it out effectively. A 5-minute 101 for foliar sprays, some big don'ts and some do's that we need to make sure that we're looking at, because just because we run around with a boom doesn't mean it's going to make much of a difference to our paddock. It's quite a bit involved, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a bit of learning and understanding around it. I suppose to take the guesswork, like let's just talk if we're doing, say, wheat or a crop like that. We might have an understanding of the soil, like what it usually is low in, calcium or whatever it may be. So that's always going to be your friend. There's certain minerals that I know if we've got that in good supply in the leaf, it's going to prime the plant. What we want to try and do with the foliar is sort of correct deficiencies that are hard sometimes to correct in the soil, because you might have calcium deficiency and they go, okay, you got to put on 7 ton of lime or 6 ton of gypsum or whatever. That can be a big expense and take a lot of time. So say, well, then we do a tissue test, like a blood test of the plant, and we can foliar on the calcium at reasonably low and economic rates to get adequate supply in the leaf. Now that primes that plant's ability to photosynthesize, which means it's pumping more carbon, sugars into the ground, and which will then encourage it, that'll feed bugs and things in the soil and facilitate growth. So it can be a very efficient way to correct deficiencies, rather than putting a little bit of calcium in the soil and it straight away locks up with phosphorus or sodium, or phosphorus locking up with iron. These things can lock up in the soil. So by the foliar we can correct deficiencies, avoiding that lockup in the soil. And I've seen examples where we've had canola crops showing signs of boron deficiency, and half a kilo to a kilo of boron a hectare, at $3 a hectare spend, can get half a ton to 3/4 of a ton yield increase on that canola from where we put that little bit of boron on to not. Now there's critical times to do the foliars, for in growing grain production, but 2 main ones is sort of tillering, because to set your yield potential, and then flowering to set the plant's ability to set and hold flowers and turn them into fruit. Because sometimes we set flowers and then you get hot weather environment and then those flowers drop off and then we've lost yield. So that's where the right nutrition at those times can be a massive difference.
So we've got a finite time to get these sprays on, pretty much, you're saying, is that right? The timing is fairly critical?
Yep, to a point. But in saying that too, obviously, say you're broadcasting urea as an example, that's obviously got to go out in front of a rain. So you got to wait, and you get a big rain coming, you go out and everyone's going nuts putting 100, 200, whatever urea out. Then the forecast changes, and now all of a sudden, instead of getting an inch of rain, you get a mill or two of rain. That can be very not ideal, because you've just spread this urea that potentially could be lost. But that's where the foliars are good, because you don't really necessarily need a rain to wash it in. We can put it out before the rain or just come out after the rain, do it. Some of the things you've got to consider, though, especially down here, is cold, wet winters. If we're looking at getting our nutrition out and then we get too cold and wet and we can't get on paddocks, well, then that's no good. So that's where we might still need to don't shut your eyes to not having the right nutrition up to carry you through. But like we said today, if you go put all your nutrition up front, sometimes we're sowing dry at home, we've got no subsoil and we're just rolling the dice hoping it rains. Now we go out with a reduced rate at sowing, and then if the season's going good, we can keep just priming it and pumping the nutrition in through foliar. But if not, we just hold back, and then we're not got as much on the table to worry about. So there's a few different things. The other big, that take the guesswork out, test. We test everything.
I was going to mention that, because one of your slides you actually written down test about 4 times at the bottom of the slide. So, And what do you mean by that? Because you mentioned tissue tests then.
Yep.
Yep. And you also said a lot of Brix tests you do.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you really like to look at?
Well, I mean, the soil tests are good for understanding, like of where we're at, and then you can lay your tissue or sap analysis over that, and it gives you a good picture of, are we getting enough of this into the plant or not? Because just because sometimes, it might have, say, potassium in the ideal range in your soil, but if you've got high sodium, you mightn't be able to get enough potassium into your plant because the plant's taken up too much sodium, because they're all, cations and anions, and we won't go into all that. But so then we've got a potassium deficiency. So in some of those situations, like a kilo, even though we've got good adequate levels of potassium, a kilo of potassium as a foliar can get a big response. So having a picture of both of them, but then the sap and tissue tests take a bit of the guesswork out, because it actually tells you, like a blood test, what's going on, and then we can then use that information and data to create a blend and a foliar to put it on. And it can be, like in terms of the nitrogen, dissolving that urea and getting it. Now, there's ways you can just dissolve it and put it on and you may get a response, but if you put a carbon source like fulvic powder or fulvic with it, and then get the right minerals, manganese or whatever in small amounts you're missing, that can give a massive response to your plant.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned cold, wet winters before. You haven't mentioned gibberellic acid. Do you use that at all, or what's your view on that? Because there's quite a few guys down here that use it.
Yeah, look, I think any microbes that can help stir up things and are active in cold, wet conditions are good. I haven't used the pure thing of that as such at home, but we do a lot of different microbes and brewing and different things, so there could be forms of that in some of the products we're using. But look, I think with that stuff, one way I remember learning to test whether it's going to be economical, valuable for us to do or not, is if we do the Brix test of the plant and then we foliar it on, and we want to do another reading of that plant, sometimes within an hour, but at least a day or two later. So we take the Brix at 3 o'clock today, this afternoon, say we do a foliar in the morning, we do a Brix test then. Well, those Brixes will naturally rise, but we might test it at 3 o'clock the day before, first. So it was at 7 or whatever yesterday there. Then we foliar the stuff on, and then at the same time of the day, test it the next day later. And we want to see an increase in that Brix from where it was the day before. And if we see at least a 2% increase in Brix, we know that whatever we've put on has been a good benefit thing, because it's enhancing that. Now, once we lift that Brix up, we start getting that plant to photosynthesize at a higher rate. So we're pumping more carbon, and we've done testing around this and proven this at home. 2, you think about animals grazing that, you've essentially lifted the Brix, which is nutrient density and sugars. So that plant, they're going to put on more weight. I encourage people, go and test. Spray half your paddock, don't spray the other half. Wait a day or two, throw animals on, see what they do. And if
they'll go to the sprayed side.
They'll like the sweet stuff. Yep. So, and then, we're doing trials at home where we'll measure live weight gains on both. So then you can go, geez, we're gaining an extra half a kilo a day over there at $3-4 a kilo. So and then you times that out by how many head you're running, soon pays for that foliar spray.
So just from thinking here from a practical point of view, when are you spraying? What plant stage of growth? And then when are you putting animals on after sprays? Or are you spraying after you pulled animals off to increase growth? Or what's your sort of program if you're looking at a livestock enterprise?
Yeah, and a livestock enterprise depends on your production, rainfall, all that. So how hard you want to push it. But like in a dry environment, like we do sometimes a bit of both. Put a foliar on prior to the animals going on, because that'll prime the plants and get sugars high, so we'll get better live weight gains. And then when we take them off, we wait for a bit of. We're never grazing them to the floor. We graze them so we're still leaving a solar panel, like a foot, or ideally, 8 inches or so of leaf or whatever. Then we've got something to hit a target. We'll do a foliar on that, and then we'll get faster recovery from the grazing. And then there's different times in the cropping as well. But the cool thing with this is, like, say we go out and broadcast urea, there's so much. Do we got to wait 2 weeks? Do we got to wait 3 weeks before we put the animals on because of nitrates in the plant? And we can kill cattle or create problems, mastitis, all these things with hot, full of nitrates, low sugars. This way, we could potentially, if we want, do a foliar, have it balanced, and then put the cows in an hour later, 2 hours later, and no worries about nitrates or anything like that.
You just touched on then, and I said something that I hadn't heard before, but as nitrogen increases in a plant, the sugars has to go down. Is that?
Yeah, well, it's very hard to have the both, because usually, say here's the sugars, which are nutrient density in a plant or a crop, and then we put a lot of nitrogen on, which accelerates growth. So the plants, all the cell, everything just takes off, and it essentially gets filled with water, unless you're putting more minerals than that on. So you're effectively diluting the minerals that are in that plant already, because it's growing so fast with the urea. And we see when we test them with a Brix meter that the nitrates will go up in the plant, and then the sugars will go down. So we're growing more growth, but I've talked to a lot of dairy farmers that might chuck 100, 200, 300 kilos urea on. We're growing all this grass, but it's not actually coming out in much more volume milk in the vat all the time. But so if we can push that growth in a more balanced way, that's what we do with the foliars, and not just put nitrogen on, but put calcium, zinc, phosphorus, whatever. We're then building that whole plant up, minerals, and then when they graze that, we can see milk production and live weight gains really go.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just triggered a documentary I watched on chickens, actually. So chickens back in, I think it was about the 50s, used to have more omega-3 fatty acids than salmon. Yeah, right. But now with genetic gains in growth rates and that, they grow so fast that there's actually not very dense nutrients in the chickens these days. And so it's a similar story with the plants. The quicker they grow, full of water and not that nutrient dense, that's what we want to grow animals. So
yeah, and I've been to many of these days and heard scientists that have studied this and looked at pre-World War II, that after that there was that green revolution where they started putting NPK and all that on, and got big production gains. But they said back then, you eat one apple, whatever zinc and calcium you got out of that apple. Today, to eat, to get the same amount of zinc and calcium, you got to eat 5 apples. Yeah. Because the trouble is with us at the moment as farmers, we're paid on weight. Not minerals. Like, we're paid on weight and visual appearance. Like, so if it looks good and it's big and that, they pay you on the weight. Like in wheat and stuff, you get top ups for higher protein and all that to a point. But you're not getting. No one cares how much zinc's in your wheat. But you just think about if you're then going to grind up that wheat flour and it's high in zinc, high in calcium, high in minerals, and we use that in bread and then we eat it. What's that going to do to us? And you can't tell me now, like, this is a thing, like all the health problems we seem to have. Like, I had 4 girls a year above me at school that have all passed away in the last few years from, there's got to be some dots and connections drawn. And I think we've got to remember we're food producers, not commodity producers, and we've got a responsibility to grow good quality food. And I think every farmer wants to do that. Like, no one would not want to do that, but part of what I'm trying to do is not say you're doing things wrong, but just inspire or maybe get people to intrigue to what's another way. Instead of grabbing for a chemical drum to put a fungicide on to treat this symptom, let's put some nutrition in and just make this plant grow better, which the flow-on effect is we get a better quality product at the end to sell.
Well, I really liked what you had to say today, and it's inspired me again to go back down that path, and it does take work, I think, and like you said in the session today, you can't just cut off old ways and go straight into this new. It's a gradual progression, so you don't shock the system too much. So yeah. Anything else to say before I've got one more question for our guests at the end, but anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Yeah, I'd just say, get out, come. This is like Gippy Ag, so good, the ability to come in and test these systems, test these theories, and then share and learn it out. And I think we're so lucky as farmers that people are so willing to learn and share from each other. And yeah, I'm not here to say anyone's doing anything bad or you can't use this. It's just do less harm and try and do things that are good. And go out, if you're going to make changes, sometimes it can take a while for your paddocks or soils or crops to adapt and wean off or wean on, get on that, that process. So, keep doing what you're doing, it works, but set a bit aside, trial little areas like you guys are doing, prove the concept, get it working, and then expand on it, because at the end of the day, we've all got to be profitable as well. So
Yep. Now, we didn't actually mention your Grant Sims, but your company name is?
Oh, Down Under Ag, yeah. We're farmers up in Northern Victoria, but also have a seed business, and we sell seed mixes and liquid, alternative fertilisers and products to help us transition into this system.
Yep. So if anyone wants to find out any more information, either Down Under Ag or Grant Sims on the web, and you'll find lots of stuff and be pointing in the right direction. But our last question, which this year we're asking a new question at the end of our podcast, and is, if you could sit down with a young yourself, what advice would you give yourself as a youngster? It doesn't have to be ag related. It could be a life lesson or ag lesson or whatever you like.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's probably a few things there, but look, I think just being curious to keep learning. There's probably times where I've gone in too hard on things and been burnt, financially and mentally by going, things not working and that, but then you step back. So just start small, keep learning, keep asking questions, and I think if we can all just try and do something better and then share with, our peers and friends and neighbours, then we all can benefit and all grow better as well together.
Yeah, well, we've definitely benefited in this reason for having you down, and you're down tomorrow as well, so appreciate your time down here, and it's very evident that you're seeking knowledge every day, and you didn't come across like you had all the answers, but you're on a journey, and so it was really, really good to have you in the area. Really appreciate you coming down, so thanks, Grant.
Thanks, Alistair. It's been a pleasure to be here. I love coming down here, and keep up the good work, guys. It's so good.
Very good. All right, bye for now.
Good on you. Thanks, mate.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.